During the day, I worked at my regular job, but in the evenings, I rode my bicycle to deliver pizza. Even though the gig only lasted for a few hours on average, that particular night really screwed with my head. I received an order to deliver to a location that was a little off the beaten path a few months ago. It was one of those situations where I had to pedal my way to the edge of town, where the street abruptly came to an end next to a dark, ominous forest. I'll tell you right now that it wasn't the kind of place you wanted to be after dark. I received the order details, which were a little odd. Go through the gate, to the front door and walk to the kitchen, said the instructions. I concurred. It seemed simple enough. When I arrived, the house appeared to have been there from the beginning of time. Although there were some creepy vibes present, the pizza needed to be delivered. Something in the window caught my attention as I approached the house. The movement resembled a shadow and vanished in an instant. Considering it to be a trick of my eyes, I ignored it. I shrugged it off and walked to the gate. It was already ajar, so I just had to push it open. Then I opened the creaky front door that beeped like something out of a horror movie. It appeared to be empty for a brief period because the interior was completely dark. But that shadow thing, that's when things started to get strange. Nobody answered when I yelled, "Hello, are you home?" Only my own voice could be heard in the darkness. But there was an issue. I was clinging to that pizza box like it was my lifeline, even though my gut told me this wasn't right. I moved forward in silence, moving down that lengthy, eerie hallway. I assumed the kitchen was there because there was an open door. I walked through the door and it was indeed the kitchen. I put down the pizza box and called once more to see if anyone was home. But again, no answer. Suddenly I heard a loud bang of the front door slamming shut. With the pizza box left on the table, I almost jumped out of my skin. The hallway immediately caught my attention, but nobody was there. It seemed as though the wind was deceiving me. I rushed to the front door without stopping, my heart beating like a jackrabbit on steroids. I mounted my bike with a bound and pedaled furiously. Then guess what? When I turned around, the shadowy figure at the window was still there. It was terrifying, but I couldn't really make out much else. I felt an adrenaline rush, and I pedaled back to tell my boss about what happened. I dragged my trembling self back to the pizza shop. He gave me the okay to go home for the night because I was as white as a ghost. But he was all. Nothing actually happened, so let's not bother the cops, alright? At home, the entire incident kept playing back in my head. I tossed and turned, trying to figure out if I had just met some spectral pizza enthusiast. I couldn't let it go after a few days had passed. So I made the decision to drive to that creepy house during the day. It appeared to be a typical house, nothing unusual, except that the light was on this time. I had to do something about it, so I parked and mustered up the courage to ring the doorbell. A lady answered the door shortly after, and she appeared completely normal. She had this perplexed expression on her face as I inquired about the recent pizza order. She claimed they didn't even order pizza. I rubbed my eyes in disbelief. She looked frightened as well after I revealed what had happened. We were both shivering as we stood there together. She claimed though that she wasn't even at home that night. Both of us were now terrified. My head was spinning like a top as I thanked her for her time and left the room. I was still as perplexed as ever, so here I am. I don't have any answers. All I have is a nagging suspicion that there is more to the world than meets the eye. What was that enigmatic figure? Who was playing a prank on me in that house? You can be sure that I'll think twice before making another delivery to the forest's edge. I used to work at a restaurant. Anything you wanted to order, we would prepare for you, no questions asked. The surprising part was that we also provided delivery service, and I don't mean the standard, everyday kind. No, we'd deliver the food to your doorstep. bells and whistles included. Particularly as a result of the home delivery, the restaurant was well liked. Things changed for the worse one evening. We had a strict cut-off time in our kitchen of 10 p.m, and by 9:30 we were prepared to close it down for the evening. A new order came in just as we were about to finish. The request had been made, and this was going to be the night's big showdown. Consequently, I got ready, loaded up on goodies, and left. The address was a complete mystery. It was on a street I had never visited. One of those lonely lanes with a few scattered homes. The address didn't match any of the houses, which I discovered as I made my way. I made the decision to leave my car and conduct a brief investigation on foot. Despite my best efforts, there did not appear to be a house with the house number given. My phone jolted me out of my skin with a loud ring just as I was about to give up and go back. A voice pierced the strange silence on the other end and said, "Follow the lighted path behind the last house." I hesitantly replied, "Hello." Before I could say anything, they hung up. The food bag became a lifeline for me as I stood there with a chill running down my spine. It appeared as though the evening had transformed into a horror film plot. But hey, I wasn't about to let some creepy caller ruin my delivery strategy. The only source of illumination on the entire street was the path, which beckoned home from the shadows. I cautiously stepped onto it as my heart raced around in my chest. A small house with a man standing in front of it loomed at the path's end. It's odd, but I reasoned that he might be a hungry soul who was awaiting a meal. I crept up on him and took a close look because something about his demeanor screamed trouble. Then he charged at me like a flaming arrow. My veins raced with panic, and I fled. Even the food didn't cross my mind. So I just dropped it. My car was parked a short distance away, and I had it in my sights. I caught a glimpse of his back and noticed that his eyes were blazing with an insane intent that gave me the chills. Fear was strongly tasted on my tongue as I jumped into my car and sped away. I anticipated seeing him chasing after me when I looked in the rearview mirror, but the street was strangely deserted. He didn't follow me. I skidded to a stop a safe distance away and collected my thoughts. I dismissed my imagination, attributing it to stress and adrenaline, and wondered what had just happened. Maybe the guy was just playing a weird prank to get free food, but that doesn't matter to me. I wasn't going to risk my life for $20. I told my boss what had happened when I got back to the restaurant. Although equally perplexed as I was, he didn't dismiss it. He dialed the police's number and began to tell them the bizarre story of the failed delivery. The time before the arrival of the police dragged on like molasses. They received the rundown from us, including the incorrect address, the man at the door, and the hasty retreat. Skepticism and worry could both be seen on their faces. They said they would investigate, and I hoped they could solve this strange puzzle. Anxiety gnawed at me as the night went on. What if that guy was some kind of insane lunatic and wasn't just scrounging for a free meal? The tension was palpable when the police eventually made their way back. They claimed that the man was completely gone. There was only the food bag, which was unopened, lying there like a bent souvenir. I questioned whether I had actually stared into danger or if my mind was playing tricks on me because it seemed like the whole thing was a bad dream. It dawned on me suddenly late at night. That guy wasn't looking for food. He had completely different goals in mind. An unsettling realization coursed through me as my stomach began to churn. It's possible that he was seeking me out for some evil motive. Moreover, I couldn't help but have the impression that whatever had happened that night was still very much in progress as the darkness outside seemed to draw in. I've had my fair share of unsettling encounters as a food delivery driver. Nothing could have prepared me for that chilling evening. It was the kind of pitch black, starless night that gives you the creeps. I was making my way through the wilderness to deliver something to a distant place. The app had me navigating through winding, deserted roads that seemed to have been abandoned by civilization itself. I was already on guard when I spotted a faint glimmer in my rearview mirror. A lone spotlight pierced the night. My first thought that it was just a coincidence to see someone else going in the same direction faded away like stale bread as the miles passed. There was no question that the vehicle was following me, and the driver was not merely a chance bystander. My heart rate accelerated, my knuckles turned white, and I tightened my grip on the wheel. I started to shiver and couldn't stop feeling frightened. No matter how slowly or quickly I drove, the car kept up a close following. It resembled a shadow that was always watching and waiting. By telling myself that it was all in my head, I attempted to brush it off. The fear that was developing inside of me, however, was equally as real as that spotlight. Where the license plate should have been, there was nothing but a black void. My paranoia had to go into overdrive. Minutes felt like hours as the pursuit went on without interruption. I debated pulling over and confronting whoever was causing this madness, but the thought of being stranded in the middle of nowhere with a potentially dangerous stranger didn't sit well with me. With each turn and curve in the road, my heart continued to race as I drove. In the unsettling silence, I could only hear my own labored breathing. I couldn't see who was behind the wheel of that menacing car. Their intentions remained shrouded in the shadows, like some strange cat and mouse game. The chase increased in ferocity later in the evening. In my rearview mirror, the car's high beams appeared to be moving toward me. The evil energy emanating from it was almost palpable. I was gripped by panic, and I started to wonder if I was crazy. I couldn't help but wonder if perhaps this was the night that I would die horribly. I had finally made it to the delivery address, according to my GPS. I shivered as I drove up to the spot. It was not a house, but a dilapidated, old structure, like something out of a horror film. Broken windows, a sagging roof, and vines that climbed the walls. I double-checked the address because I thought there was a typo, but that was it. Right here was the location where the order was supposed to be delivered. All I could see was the ominous silhouette of the deserted building. There was no sign of life. I knew I had to make a decision when I began to feel panic rising inside of me. My instincts pleaded with me to escape this dreadful pursuit, but I also felt a strange duty to complete the delivery. It's possible that I was being stubborn out of fear, but I couldn't let the person who had ordered this food down. I debated whether to leave right away to get out of this nightmare or to stay and fulfill the order. I grabbed the bag, got out of my car, and started walking. As I drew nearer to the decaying building, I thought I was about to stumble into a trap. As I got closer to the door, my stomach was in knots. I was constantly scanning the darkness for motion. A room covered in dust and cobwebs was visible when I pushed open the creaking door in the low light. I made my way deeper inside, making noise with my footsteps. However, nobody was present, and no one was waiting for food. Silence is the only thing that exists. I was filled with anger and confusion. This was an evil joke and a ruse. They had brought me here, to a place that was empty, so I could get out of that car. I backed out of the building, my heart racing, and ran to my car. The vehicle in front of me was still making engine noises, and I could sense its presence. My mind told me I needed to escape this nightmare. I slammed the car into gear and sped away from that scary place. The car in front of me finally stopped after catching up to me briefly as I negotiated the winding roads. Once I reached a contemporary setting, everything started to make sense. The people who had placed the order were in charge of it. I couldn't understand why they came up with a game that was so terrifying. I was only aware of two things: that I had just about pulled off a horror movie, and that I would never again regard a food delivery order in the same way.